All
right. All right. Today is April 17th. This is the Finance Committee meeting. I'm joined by the Finance Committee, Councilor Shoup and Councilor Cushing. And we're here to talk about the CIP and then give any additional guidance to staff as they work with our feedback over the next couple of weeks to come back on May 1st and give us a recommendation that we can consider and bring to council. So with that, just turning it over to staff, or I don't know how we want to do this. I know Nick and Nicole are here to talk about CAP. Tom, you had mentioned you guys were chatting this morning, so I don't know if there's a different proposal or if we.
Yeah, I was using this morning just to get up to speed and recall some of the details regarding lights for Peterson Field. And also just get a full assessment on the pickleball court situation in town. So just we're prepared to respond to questions should you have them.
Okay.
Would you like us to address those things or?
I mean, if you guys want to share any information you have that would help us, I think that would be good.
Sure, why don't we start with pickleball, if that's okay. I do have a handout here, and I think we can probably pull it up on the screen, but Nicole and Nick put together the number of courts that we have in town and some comparative analysis as well. I think that was forwarded to you, you got it there. And I'll let them kind of describe what you're looking at.
Yeah, sure. So if you take a look at holistically about what Scarborough offers for surrounding communities, a lot of it is about multi-court use, right? And a lot of towns are now starting to go the dedicated route. You'll see Portland is building 6 new dedicated courts for pickleball this May. There's 8 dedicated courts in Cape Elizabeth. So the growing trend is more of dedicated courts versus split use courts. Here, if you look at the sheer volume or the total amount of courts that we have, we're in line with other communities. But what that does is it puts pressure on the single use sport of tennis or basketball, because we have multiple courts on our basketball court. But in comparison, we're relatively in line. But I would say that the growing trend is the dedicated courts, and to look at, if we were to look at options for that, where those would be, the funding sources for those, and what we would need to allocate. Just in terms of a little bit of history on my CIP allocations or what I brought forward this year, the mindset from me, I had no background in a few weeks to put forth a CIP and a budget. So I went from the mindset of, less is more, while I took the time to meet with the community groups, evaluate their needs, evaluate our facilities, and then put a plan in place. If I knew what I did months ago now versus 2 months ago, I may have brought forth things a little bit differently. Since then I've had opportunity to meet with a few community groups and see where projects may have been, or ideology around that. In terms of pickleball, I think the fundamental piece here is where it goes. The allocation of $291,000 for the skate park. There was a lot of talk last year about relocation of the skate park, if it was best suited to be, behind town hall. And I know Todd looked at 2 different locations for that, and both of them fell through in that process. He looked at the water tower space, it's too close in connection with businesses, with the school. He looked at an area between the tennis courts in Wentworth. The footprint there is a little bit smaller. You can't maximize your usage of courts. There's potential other spaces, but none of that came to fruition. So what we have right now is $290,000 that's been allocated over the last 2 years in CIP money that we haven't pushed forward a project with. So I think what we would look is for guidance from council or the committee of potentially utilizing maybe some of that funding from the skate park to put potential courts on the skate park location, while we then invested some time and energy in an alternate location for the skate park. That would be one opportunity. Or do we look for additional funding through the CIP for allocation of funds for pickleball, and then look for a location?
So are you saying we already have funding available for the skate park renovation, but we haven't utilized it?
Yeah, the 2 sites that we explored have not materialized. And it's important that relocation was the conversation. So the skate park is not to be at that location. I think the reuse of that space could very well be pickleball if we choose to. It lends itself to 8 courts. It would need to have proper fencing and wind screening. And that would be probably what we would suggest. In fact, in the CIP in FY 27, we were going to be looking to build out those 8 pickleball courts.
The
Would there
rough
be
cost of
parking?
a project like that would be $100,000 to $125,000. It is limited on parking. There's probably 8 to 10 parking spots there, but there's additional town parking, high school parking for folks to
I
walk
think it's
over.
work at town hall evenings and weekends.
Yeah, I think one of my issues is like the parking down there already. I mean, I don't understand why you have no parking signs. When there's a game, people are parked all up and down that side of that road, which there shouldn't be. And it's only one car can get through. So to add more, I feel like it would trickle down to that situation. I was part of those discussions around the Community Services Advisory Board. I mean, I guess, and that was our order of operation in our mind during those discussions was we need to first deal with the skate park. I personally am uncomfortable with just saying, we're gonna get rid of the skate park and we'll eventually find a new location. I don't want to dismiss that. I think that's something that we have that
Mhm.
kids do use, maybe not the way we would expect. And I personally just don't like to jump just because something, I wouldn't say it's a trend, but I'm just saying this is somewhat new. And when we look at these numbers, I think we should be more comfortable. I've said for the last like 3 days, we have a communication issue with especially our pickleball people who are completely unaware of the courts that are available to them. And then also, I mean, the pickleball person last night made their own comment that we can't even play on the basketball courts. So, I mean, I appreciate that.
Well, we do have funding in this CIP to resurface those courts.
So, and I think we need to say that that needs to stay, and that's would be our response to the pickleball people at this point, is we actually have 12 courts, guys, and we're gonna fix up the basketball courts in the meantime. But for me personally, I do not want to eliminate a skate park without
Yeah.
knowing where it's gonna be relocated.
I guess I just don't understand why. Like, I don't think we need 8 courts like next year. I think what we need is like 2 dedicated courts next year, maybe 2 more dedicated, like, I just don't understand why it has to be this big investment for pickleball, like, even where we have it today, looks like there's space right next to it where you could probably add 2 more
Well,
courts.
Angela engineered that. We maximized what little space we had and had actually kind of graded and create that space. There really isn't to make sure that there's a playable athletic field next to it. So we really don't see any opportunity there. The skate park site is ideally suited, and
Mhm.
though it seems tempting to do it incrementally, it's not terribly efficient. It's certainly going to cost you a lot more. So I think we do need to move in the direction of dedicated use, because tennis is restricted. While we share the use, basketball is restricted,
Mhm.
and we'll know in a couple of years whether it's a trend or something's going to stick.
So what's the skate? I'm sorry,
Skate park is located right behind us here.
that's the little thing we ought to get on my skateboard.
Right.
Yeah.
Come up and down.
And the reason it's up for consideration is the ramps themselves are becoming safety hazards. They're built out of metal, they're very heavy, they actually sink into the pavement.
Mhm.
And so to resurface that lot, they need to be physically removed, resurfaced and replaced. And the concern is that they are in a condition such that they need to be lifted, craned out, that they will likely not survive that they will
So,
disassemble.
and that serves an adolescent population, young kids ages from what to what?
It varies.
Yeah.
There's,
Yeah,
there's,
there's little
there's,
kids.
there's later teens and mid 25, 30-year-old folks. Right now, it's not a destination skate park because of the current condition it's in, and there's been other communities that have invested into specific.
I would argue
So-
that the avid skaters are seeking out other better facilities. This was state of the art. When it was put in, it's no longer.
Mhm.
And tell me about Little League.
Before we
Yeah.
move on
Well-
to that, can we
Well, I'm
finish the
not moving
pickleball?
on to that.
Okay.
I'm trying to get some information
Yeah.
here so I can make a judgment with respect to pickleball. But these things are not inside. So we heard last night testimony about from the baseball people that they contribute a ton of money towards maintaining the baseball pucks. And so, and the other piece I heard from pickleballers is that they are much more multi-generational, but they tend to be, at least the original pickleballers were people, boomers, basically. So, I guess wondering in this model, should we consider for some of these sport type things, where they have an association and so forth, some matching funds in the process. That's wonderful. Is that, it sounds to me like the baseball people, the Little League people said, look, we paid for half the lights in Peterson Field. They've raised the money to do it. They are a constituency, primarily for kids. I heard the pickleballers describe themselves in a similar way. They said we have an association of about 1,000 people, so forth. And maybe if they want some dedicated space, they could contribute something to the making.
I think the difference is the pickleball community is largely fragmented. It's not organized, certainly to the level of Little League. There's registration and fees and decades of tradition, whereas the pickleballers, I think you heard, it's a Facebook group. So it's more organizing where we're going to meet and play and how we're going to organize ourselves. But I don't think they have the structure in place, and I wouldn't expect they ever would, frankly, just by nature. It's nature of the sport.
So Nick, can you just re-articulate like what you think is the best solution to that, like essentially either increases court availability or yeah, I'm just curious, like what would you?
I want to be very clear. I would never want to take a recreational amenity away from the town. I think that all we should be doing is pushing for more recreational opportunities as we're growing. But I think as we're currently constituted, we have no relocation place for that skate park. The best place in my purview for pickleball courts would be on the current skate park as constituted. We could get 6 to 8 courts there. We can fence it in. We can allocate some of the funding we've had for skate park and spend the next 3 months with our advisory teams, neighborhood meetings, and really seek out a location to put the skate park in a place where it's more functional, it's more available, and support both projects as a whole. You know, I probably would have put $100,000 in for pickleball courts, thinking and knowing the need. If we put dedicated pickleball courts in, it's going to relieve the pressure on the tennis courts at Blue Point. We could so much as remove the lines at Blue Point Park. We could remove the lines from the basketball court, and we could meet the needs of all 3 segments of the groups, and then attain a skate park. That, I think that's our best foot forward.
So I guess my question would be like, if we already have the skate park that's been approved and we're still struggling to kind of move that forward, what's the harm in just in this year's CIP adding the 100K for the pickleball court so that we can do make sure that as we go forward with the solution, that it's committed that when the skate park moves, if that's location, the pickleball.
Yeah, I would say we don't need that money. Is the reality. If we don't want to build pickleball, can't build until we have a home and a new skate park. That's going to be next year before we're in a position of building pickleball courts. So I think we can defer that from a financial point of view. And if through the course of conversation, there's the interest in actually advancing pickleball, or we have a solution for a skate park, we have resources to do that. But we can run it through process with committee and have that conversation. So I don't recommend that you allocate additional funds this year. I think we've got adequate resources. We need some additional process and conversation.
So you have adequate resources to do the pickleball courts and move the skate park based on what's already been.
At least to prep a site, whether we can fully equip it. Again, we won't know that until we identify the site, identify the ramps, the construction type, so on and so forth.
So phase 1 is to rip up the old site.
Well, it's really removing the ramps, resurfacing it, and putting stanchions, and nets and screens in. So
I guess what I'm saying is that phase 1 of the skate park is to get rid of the bowling. And phase 1 of the pickleball is to put a pickleball court. So it's, I mean, you have to do both, right?
Yeah, what I heard Karen say is that we don't want to move on the pickleball until we know we've got a solution for the skate park.
And I mean,
I
personally,
think that's fair.
as a counselor, I feel comfortable saying we've identified that the skate park is where we would like to put courts. And we would like to move forward next year, but in the meantime, we actually already have funds to move the skate park. And then maybe we can revisit that and determine, I'm with you, I'm uncomfortable removing an activity that is there, that is established. I don't like hearing that, at one point we did have a good skate park and now people aren't using it just because we didn't take care of it. I don't know where else you would put a skate park that would be easily accessible to students otherwise than on the campus too.
Well, and it also needs to be in a visible location.
Right.
It can be an attractive nuisance and some vandalism and such. So having it kind of exposed on 3, if not 4 sides is ideal.
Police chief's back window.
My concern here is more, it's uncertain what's gonna happen with the skate park.
Mhm.
We don't really have a plan for the skate park. We had this in the CIP last year to be in the FY 26 CIP. We're pushing it in 27. Are we gonna push it in 28, then to 29? I'm comfortable at least saying, let's add it in the 26 budget. The money will sit there. You have the authority to build them. And if the skate park can be done next year, then you have the authority to build the pickleball courts right after that. So to me, that's like, I just want to make sure that if that is the holistic plan, that we fund the holistic plan and can give certainty to the residents, because I think that's been part of the miscommunication that's happened. They will claim, whether it's true or not, that they were told last year that this was going to happen this year. And so I think that's part of the miscommunication. And if you look at our CIP, that might be how they're drawing that conclusion. They're seeing, well, you said you're going to fund this last year, but now it's not in this year's CIP. We know that the CIP is fluid and changes, but if the strategy is really move the skate park, build it somewhere else, put pickleball courts in, that's what I'm hearing, then let's fund the whole thing and make sure that the whole thing happens.
Why can't we break it up over the year? I know we have a goal that we want to make, and I want to support lights tonight. So I'm making a choice of like, I'm not doing both. And I personally think we have a huge issue with people not knowing where there are courts.
Yeah.
I mean, all the emails where you only have 2 courts, you only have 2 courts. And I'm like, do you not understand that there are other courts, other places? And I think
Dedicated courts, right?
part of the other conversation that we had a lot with Todd was that there was issues with people from other towns coming. And so I feel uncomfortable being like, we need more courts simply because we don't have control over the usage of our current courts right now. I understand that we got a lot of feedback from them. I also don't think that I don't think they're a group of 1,000. I think they're a Facebook group of people who are trying to organize and get together, and I do appreciate it, but I am concerned that we do have competing interests and only so much funds to go forward. So it's not that I'm against this. I also don't want to abandon the skate park.
Yeah.
John, I think you make a decent point. I mean, budget authorization is just that. We would likely propose to bond this, so it doesn't have direct impact on tax rate. More than likely, even if we go forward with the sequence we've talked about, it won't happen until, a year from now, by the time we get there. But having money allocated in the budget, I think, should give comfort. And there's probably no harm in doing so, if that's truly our intention.
Yeah, that's my intention. I don't expect pickleball courts to be put in until we follow the process.
When and how much parking?
Well, it says
Are we
8.
creating a new parking lot too? Or are we gonna be having like
6.
overflowing parking in town now? And I
No,
think that's,
I would expect they would use the spaces that are here, certainly town hall, anything in schools available to them. They
I
should
think
not
we
be
generally
parking
have a
on the road.
parking issue down at Memorial Park anyways, like when there's sports and games and things. And so I think those are just my general concerns of that area. It's not a throughway, like when there's a game going on. So then just to add more people.
Well, if we get micro transit, then right, Angela? Then that will help. So I'm gonna motion to add it, and if you guys want to vote it down, that's up to you guys. So I would like to motion that we move the pickleball courts to the FY 26 CIP for 100K.
Do we know what the impact is? We're just adding it, I don't know what the bottom line is, what we're doing.
Well, it
Let's just-
says in here 100K
Our
for,
total budget to date and what our goal is, like the whole budget.
well, like Tom said, this doesn't have an impact on the tax rate.
Okay,
So it would be
Okay.
neutral impact.
thank you.
Take a
I
second.
will second that motion.
So
Discussion.
we've discussed it. So any more discussion?
I want
I need more
Okay.
time.
to explain. I support it, but what I'm understanding is that this is putting the money there so that we can move through a thoughtful phase one process, which accommodates both needs. It's not a commitment to do this, then, that, there. It's basically saying, we heard you, it's in the plan, it's not something that will get deferred, we're putting it in here now. And in the meantime, I think that we should really work at addressing Karen's concern, which is to make sure that people understand how to access the multi-use courts and address the parking issues and the like. And maybe by the time it comes to actually put a spade in the ground, we will have discovered that the need is not so pressing.
Yeah. And
So
maybe,
that to me seems,
Yeah.
that to me seems like,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to be sensitive to what you're
Mhm.
saying. And this, I think, puts the can down the road just a little bit and allows for that.
I would also add, maybe as we go through this, I actually think you'll probably, if we did a campaign and outreach, there'd probably be more interest in offering land to put 8 pickleball courts than probably putting a skate park. So while it sounds like staff thinks the skate park should move and we should put ball courts there, I'm wondering for your parking concern too, like, is there a different location that would be better for parking that somebody would be willing to partner with us because they want pickleball courts? Like, I just don't know if the skate park would, clearly there's energy for pickleball, but I don't know if that same energy exists for skating. I know there are skaters in town, but I just don't know if that's so to the point at this stage where people are like, yeah, I'd love to put a skate park right here. And it sounds like that's been part of the challenge. You looked at 2 sites and I don't know why they didn't
And by
work.
nature, that it's a little tougher to get to neighbor meetings and get feedback from.
Yeah, anecdotally, I don't know that anyone has a better anecdotal opinion of the skate park use just because it's outside my window. I see it, I've seen it for 16 years. It has changed over time. Interesting demographic. It's largely parents with kind of toddler age kids on with helmets and their scooters, just kind of on a safe play surface.
Mhm.
Or late 20s into late 30s males probably were skaters back in the day and still do it on occasion.
Yeah.
And then the occasional group of middle school kids that come up here after school. Whereas back in the day, it was very, very busy. You'd have a dozen active committed skaters
Mhm.
at one time.
Do you feel like that's due to the decrease in quality?
It could be,
Or
or
just
I
like
don't
the
know.
trend
trend-
of
I don't know if
skating?
Trends are changing, and that's the tough thing is that constituency is hard to identify,
Right.
hard to get together and get their opinions,
Mhm.
right?
Nick, I think you should put on a helmet and a board, go down there,
Yeah.
hang out with this.
Yeah.
Please put a helmet.
Or maybe Nicole, yeah.
And I
somebody
mean,
could-
I think that's fine, I guess. I just would like to. I'm uncomfortable if in a year we can't replace the skate park, just being like, we're just gonna get rid of it because.
No, I don't want to get rid of it either.
And so I think that's my holdback is, I understand it's not maybe heavily used, but it is something I would imagine most towns our size have. And that's something
Well,
that,
one thing we could do, and there's nothing like, it's not creating a crisis, but kind of get the word out that we're considering this. And we can certainly leverage our communication systems to say that this is our plan and to see if we can get some people to come forward and give us more feedback
Yeah.
about the skate park. Because frankly, we also need help on design. What do you want in a skate park?
right,
We're not.
What are the true needs,
Yeah.
the footprint,
Mhm.
What sort of ramps?
Yeah. And
By a scientific observation, it's early release days are the busiest days.
Yeah.
Skate park.
Someplace.
Excuse me.
That's the answer to participation.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the point for staff too, is like sequencing here matters. And I think maybe this will spur some engagement, because
Mhm.
going back to what I said, if it's true that that is the best location, then let's rally those 1,000 people who want these 8 courts to help us get people to come and help us find a site for the skate park and
Fair enough.
design it. So it might be a good way to kind of put a carrot out there to get people involved. So with that, any other discussion on this one? No? All right, all those in favor? All right, motion passes. All right, do you guys want to talk about lights now?
Sure. Just a couple of comments.
I'd like some peanuts, please.
Yeah. So just a couple of things to ground the conversation, perhaps. You've heard a lot, received a lot of input. Staff, for our part, haven't provided much response and haven't had the opportunity, I guess. The lights per se are not necessarily, they're not included in our master plan. I don't think that's a death knell on it, but
that was
I
a
think
question I had.
was raised. But what's certainly true is Todd Souza has had detailed discussions with Little League. Little League has decades, as was heard the other night, of good solid partnership with the town, one of our most trusted partners when it comes to recreation, frankly. And we want to do whatever we can to help advance that further. Just the other thing, just to kind of level set, we did have a transition with with Nick coming on. I think Dennis reached out to him maybe 3 or 4 weeks after he actually submitted the budget. So
Mhm.
things might have been a bit different had that connection been made. It's no one's fault. It's just a victim of kind of the circumstance we find ourselves in. Some of the things swirling around in our minds that need some further attention. And we realize at this juncture, Dennis is days away from his opening day and the season will be over before the budget's approved almost. So in all reality, this improvement won't take effect until next season. In the meantime, the sorts of things that I think we want to make sure we run to ground. Presumably these are will be town assets, are built on town property. So some involvement in what they're putting in, the quality of them, the engineering design, you don't want to, be too particular about that, but awareness and involvement. Who pays the electric bill? Sounds simple enough, but we ought to know that up front. Questions about equity with softball, just, in our business, we need to be
Mhm.
aware of those sorts of things. I think there's an answer there in terms of use of high school fields, but we're talking about certainly neighborhood engagement, just
Yeah.
understanding
Important.
the appetite of the neighborhood, and that will likely flow into probably some policy documents in terms of time of use and such. And I think our relationship is probably to the point that it probably begs some sort of formality, a lease of sorts that give them, if I were them, with the sort of time and money they've invested, I'd like some certainty that I have use rights for some period of time. So
Mhm.
I guess I think we can use the next 6 months very wisely to kind of sort through this, which I don't think is anything's insurmountable.
Mhm.
But I think we see the value in furthering this partnership for sure, if we can iron out some of these particulars.
So how do you see that operationalized in this budget?
Well, I think you granting budget authorization is key, obviously, so we can have the confidence to have these, and I'm confident that we can work with our partner and work through these issues between now and construction time and have them up and running for, the earliest they could be available would be next spring. The only fly in the ointment is,
Tom, I think you're absolutely right, that we're gonna do it, it needs to get done, what I'm getting, it's
Mhm.
like, we go through the list of stuff. All I had this vision is they put up a light on the pole and flip it on, obviously, it's not that simple.
no,
So I would support that approach to is put it in the budget to recognize to work with the Willoughby folks in the continuation of partnership that everybody seems very happy with.
so it starts with the authorization. With that, it gives us the confidence to advance these conversations. The only fly in the ointment is if we wanted into major conflict with the neighbors, that we can't find a way to, that it's not workable, it doesn't provide the sort of utility that they're looking for and need,
Mhm.
while meeting the needs of the neighbors.
So they're
Yeah.
reminded that they have 1,000 kids with pads.
Well, and
We
again,
won't start with that, but we might have to. end
Yeah.
with it.
and so we can give the authority, but again, we can also rescind the authority if we get to a point where the neighbors aren't able to kind of reach
You-
agreement.
You have our collective word that we will not advance a project that is
Yeah.
gonna create a firestorm of controversy, so,
Mhm.
but we do need the budget to be able to execute.
Okay.
Any questions for Tom? All right, that I'd like to motion that we add the lights to the CIP. Are we only adding 50K or are we adding the full 100?
My understanding is 50 is what's been asked for. I believe the offer is they would match basically whatever else is required to.
Okay.
execute. So,
Provided that the town doesn't choose an option that's the Musco lights that are $190,000. We're going.
So
off
this
of
is
the
where you guys
estimate that
can
was
work,
provided
yeah.
Of $98,000 a year ago.
So I think
100,000.
maybe, Tom, it might be a good idea before we pick a final number for you to look at what they've got proposed and see if it still holds up. Does that make any sense or?
Frankly, I would say, why don't you bump that up to 75?
Yeah.
We'll spend only what we need.
Yeah.
We understand what the commitment is, but that gives us a little bit of flexibility. I think it may behoove us to, invest in higher quality or shielding or something that makes sense to them, but also serves the neighborhood need.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Fair.
75?
75, can I get a second?
So, second,
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Thank you.
All right. Next, I just want to make sure, Counselor Cushing, if there's anything you want to add about parking and beach parking. I know we talked about that at the last meeting and I said that's a CIP potential conversation. So is there anything specific?
Well, I don't know about the timing of it, but I'm not gonna get back on my soapbox on this issue, but the general thought of it is that the sooner we could get to year-round gated parking with a gate, with a pass, I think that we would end up with a fair fee structure and we would be able to essentially have a year-round control on the beach that gave much longer access to other folks in a way that's fair. I think that's really what I'm trying to get to, and you get a lot of data. And it seems like the sooner we get there, the better. My observation, and I'm not an expert, is that the components of doing that are the infrastructure, the electric, the internet, that sort of thing. And the second component is the gate, and the third one is the actual head. And then, then there's the issue of passes and so forth. I don't know what the timeline to accomplish that is, but it feels to me like we're 90% there, unless I'm missing something. And that's why I'm saying if there's some way in this budget we could do that, even if it were just one parking lot, so we could, the big one, so we could see how it worked. That would make sense to me. So that's my comment on, I'm in short time remote here, so I'm not gonna, I'm going to that beach as often as
Well,
possible.
Counselor, you've insisted that we make the commitment that we fully study this, and we did, and we will. We did make the commitment and we will study it. I think you're right. We've made significant investments that have enabled this in terms of gated access. So I think those will pay dividends. What I think you're missing is the enforcement component, and I'm not concerned, but I just want to make sure that we have a firm plan in place that will require some level of investment. And also the selection of technology to make sure it's reliable and serves the purpose.
I'm just puzzled about that one thing when you say enforcement. Maybe we're talking about two different things, but what I envision is just like when I go to one of the parking lots downtown, I drive in, I push a button to take a ticket, I give it to my wife, so I don't lose it, and then I park for 3 or 4 hours and then come out, stick it in the machine, put my credit card in. So I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking. And there are people who use that same parking lot in that office complex who have year-round parking passes and the like, and they just flash their pass and machine go. So that the enforcement piece of it strikes me as less, but maybe I'm missing something.
Well, there's a suggestion that we look comprehensively at including on-street parking. First off, and perhaps that's a difference in your mind. We're talking about the
Parking lot.
the parking lots. I think that is different, but on-street certainly introduces a level of enforcement required. And I think you're minimizing how easy and reliable those systems are. That what happens when the gate doesn't open and the credit card machine crashes, someone's going to be, so maybe it's not enforcement, but it's administration. Someone has to be prepared and properly compensated to respond in all of those situations. So
And I parked at Williams and not paid and not gotten a ticket. So when you talk about enforcement too, like I feel like that's an issue within itself.
Yeah.
I think you want to do it year round, and I think that is a huge change that I think personally we would have to discuss more and publicize that we're considering this. I don't know what it's like in other towns. I mean, I understand what Cape's like, but like, I actually don't go to Herd Park, and I go in the off season just because I don't need a pass. I don't like when it's crowded. I park on the street, whatever. And so I feel like that would be a big change where we change the fees again. So now you got to pay more to access it. And oh, by the way, now we're going to charge you year round, even though the lot's empty, you have to pay to come in here. And I think I generally think that's just a shift from what we've had in this town, where I'm not against it. I just don't want to do it too quickly where we're going to get like
Karen, I completely agree with you.
Pushback.
And where we're at right now is we have gates that
we haven't used yet.
we haven't used, but we take them, my guess is we'll probably take them off in winter time rather than unless we're going to close the thing up. But
Right.
my point is that that to your point about the year-round nature of it and so forth, my personal opinion is that it doesn't force any of that. Basically creates the facility to put it in incrementally to deal with the issues as they come. But as I say, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about
Mhm.
here. I know that studying it and so forth. Personal feeling about it is you can spend a fair amount of time hearing from people from away, if you will, like Saco to Buxton, and bit of fitting folks who are gonna not feel very good about having to pay $20 to come in for an hour. And that encourages scofflaw.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a meter right there now. We sat there in the beautiful day. It was there, it was functioning. The guys had just set it up. I didn't see anybody give that meter a second look as they drove by on the honor system. It just. So I'm done.
Yeah, I think
Maybe
it-
spoke my big line.
I agree with Karen that it's probably not something in this year's CIP, but I don't know if we just add a line item and a TBD in whatever year you guys think is the appropriate year of when something like this might come to fruition, just to kind of not lose sight that this is something we want to see. I don't think it's captured. Do you know if it's captured in the master plan, this concept of? Yeah, so I think,
Granular.
because I felt like when the council was there and this discussion came up, there was like general support for the notion that like, yeah, we should be using technology that might help with administrative savings on the back end. Maybe there's some other stuff,
Mhm.
but it sounds like it needs to be studied a little bit. So just having it as an item, knowing that it's,
We intend to have the research done and
Yeah.
have a report to council certainly this calendar year. So I would expect as soon as next year, we'll be in a position to advance or not.
okay. Cool.
Okay. I'm done.
Right.
Thank you.
Anything else for community
By the
services?
way, I was ready to let it pass.
Oh, sorry, I just captured it as something that you wanted to talk about.
So if anybody's annoyed.
Sorry.
It's on you.
All right, I think engineering, there were some interest in, was it engineering or autumn CIP?
Engineering, and that's just simply because I was confused at our last hearing, and I was like, why are we doing CIP? Are we not doing CIP? And I think I just wanted to continue the discussion a little more about the two, well, also with the Lower Payne Road, I think I want to wrap my mind around the fact that I'm concerned this is in response to Route 1's work. Yet we're footing the bill because they want to raise Route 1. And I just didn't know if there's funds available to get from them, or if we can say we need funds, or where that's at.
So, I guess I'll start with, regardless of the Route 1 project, Lower Payne Road needs to be looked at and addressed because it is flooded. When we had our major events, both roads are shut down. And we are proactive at times too, knowing the storm is coming, things like that. So, I would say the Route 1 crossing is, doesn't make it any different, I guess. And we still need to look at it,
Right.
regardless.
It may worsen it slightly.
Oh, it definitely
Yeah,
will, but I'm
it's
saying,
more
but
water
even
through.
if we didn't, I still need to address
Right.
that, and that's a local road, whereas the Route 1 arterial is, I think we were really pushing for DOT, this is your road. Like, this is the main thoroughfare for our region, for the state, Route 1, and they responded actually, and came and started working diligently to kind of move that along. So for us, looking at it, it still doesn't make our other issues go away. So it made us kind of pivot to kind of look at, well, yes, what will happen if that moves forward, but what will happen if it didn't move forward? I still need to look at our local road. The other thing though is it's an opportunity. I feel like this is where staff looks for opportunities and aligning with things, where our vulnerability assessment, we have some funding in that already built in to do some demonstration projects. And it seemed like there was an opportunity to, here's a demonstration project we're talking through with the stakeholder group. The other ones, there's one at Higgins Beach, there's one, a few at Pine Point. This was one of those, the kind of, as the stakeholders looked at kind of addressing where do we focus to kind of that first step forward. it gave us an opportunity to use the funds we already have, put it in that work that we're already doing to take that next step in order to put us in a position to get grant money. So that's where we're looking for the funding grant. And right now, that's where we're at is having the $50,000. That is more of a match for a larger state funded grant. So that's kind of keeping that moving, and that we do anticipate getting grant money to help support that. And FYI, our climate action plan grant also got accepted today. We
Oh,
are
awesome.
getting our grant money, so I can tell Norm.
That's great.
Yay.
Yes.
I think generally, I look at a road and it's a state route, like it's
Yeah.
Route
Yeah,
114. So in my mind, the DOT owns it. And so that's where I'm going. They don't want to deal with it anymore.
Mhm.
And I understand that there's a process behind that, but
And maybe that's why I feel like we're in a good position to get grant money and to partner.
Right.
Because it is a state aid road. It actually is helpful for DOT when they do their annual reporting to say, here's all the good work we're doing. We gave some of this money, or even DEP, we're putting this money into municipalities or making that stretch even farther.
Right.
And so it makes everybody look good
Yeah,
as we kind of move
I'll
forward.
also say as part of the Route One project, they did a lot of detailed modeling to understand what are the impacts of kind of passage of more water.
right,
Those models certainly considered above Route One affecting this area, not just public infrastructure, but private property as well.
Right.
So I was pleased that we've got the benefit of that modeling, but there was also acknowledgement in the conversation, the Route One work, that there are other impacts that come. So I think we are well positioned. There's no guarantees, but I think we are well positioned for seeking further grant opportunities.
And if we didn't get that grant, so this is a match, so we would not move forward with that project. Similar with the climate action plan, we had it posed in the budget from last year as we get the grant, this is our match, we kind of move forward. I would say this is in a similar situation.
Incidentally, all engineering projects I'm proposing using downtown TIF funds for. I think they very squarely, comfortably fit within the allowed uses. This being one of them.
Great. I just FYI, when I was at the Reimagine Route One meeting, I think it was
It
there.
all blends together, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know. I've been here a lot lately, so I'm trying to remember. The president of the Pine Point Association came up to me, and he was talking about the East Grand Avenue roadway design. He told me that he thinks residents are generally supportive of it. I think there's confusion
Okay.
that this is just for the design piece, that there's no construction or anything. So I think,
This is the design
Yeah.
piece, yeah.
and so I communicated that. So he might need some help. If he hasn't reached out yet, he might need some help
I
communicating.
did talk with him as
Okay.
well, but I didn't get that specific question, so
Mhm.
yeah. We did reach out.
Yeah.
But yes, this is in order to keep this moving is to do a final design. My intent is to get to bid documents to be able, we're ready to put it out to bid so that next year as we come in front of you for budget request is for funding that.
Mhm.
And that as soon as July 1, we can kind of put that out.
Right, this is the sequence. We first secure design funds,
Mhm.
get that including probable cost estimates, and then come back subsequent years, usually the next year for construction funding.
Okay.
so it's 175 for the design, but you have no idea what the actual impact would be to implement.
The last estimates were around 4 million.
So cheap.
For that. And so that also plays into with community engagement as we go through the final design, we can fine tune that estimate because obviously that was based on concepts and a preliminary design. As we get closer to, we can kind of have those conversations about what we're prioritizing, kind of the amenities that we're proposing in there, and we can start looking at value engineering. But it is going to be a large number, and that's where I said last time, unfortunately, those larger roadway projects, that's where I kept going for those big pots of money, like through our PAX region or through the DOT. I know we talked about, well, it's economic development, those are smaller pots, but I mean, we can look at other avenues with that too. That had been my focus in the past, is looking for the big dollars,
Mhm.
but we can start looking at other options.
Yeah,
too.
interestingly, back in 2018, when we did the preliminary plan work, we engaged the neighborhood several times, and really to our surprise, we were kind of probing around and testing roundabout options. This is where Pine Point Road, East Grand and King Street,
Whatever.
well, all those streets.
Yeah, all the
intersect.
streets.
It's a really strange intersection.
Yeah, it
I've
is.
never been through one before. Remarkably, it works, but it's really odd.
Mhm.
And we got tremendous pushback to their thought of changing
Roundabout.
So,
Mm.
this is likely to be very focused on East Grand, kind of the nuts and bolts of
Okay.
drainage of proper road base, certain running surface, sidewalks and the like.
Well, that's because I think you came out with all the roads that you're paving this year. And so
Mhm.
that's kind of why I'm like, well, wait a minute, what are we doing down there? If we're gonna repave all the roads, are we ripping some of the roads up and putting sidewalks in the next 2 years?
No, this is East Grand specific. It was
So,
not extended.
yeah,
It was-
So
I
it
just
wouldn't-
pulled
okay.
up actually the map, because we added to our transportation map on our webpage, all of the paving list, and so it's really the whole peninsula of Pine Point. So basically from Pine Point north is the paving list.
Mm.
So we are talking from that intersection to the Old Orchard line.
And so, I mean, ultimately, the study would say we need sidewalks?
Excuse me?
Would the study come?
Oh, it's not a study, it is the actual design.
The
So
design would be, we're designing side.
So we're designing a complete street, so it would include really probably pulling up some of the gravels, really reconstructing that whole roadway because it hasn't happened. And that's where you see the degradation of the pavement. And with drainage issues, that undermines that pavement even more. So it's really, I know DOT a couple years ago did, I call it paint it black. And so you start seeing those cracks come through very quickly when you do that thin coat. So we knew that was just a Band-Aid. Knowing that this was our goal is to get actually pulling out gravels, putting down new roadway, redoing the on-street parking. And then looking at safety improvements for bike and ped. We're talking about, we get a lot of complaints about the sidewalk along that section. There's a lot of utility poles in the way where you can't get a wheelchair by or a wagon, full of beach toys, or a stroller. So we're talking about really making that accommodation as well as some bike lanes. And then what we call the bump outs, we're having more strategic crossings of that road so that you're not trying to look around a parked car, you're actually coming out in a protected curved island with proper signage and things like that. So cars know that you're stepping out in front of them.
We just lost a couple parking spots down there last year, right? We did something, we rearranged them. And so I
Mhm.
think.
Councilor
just
Campbell
not
at the time was quite involved in that.
And that
Councilor
was-
Hammer's car is on East Grand Ave every morning at 6 a.m., Mr. Ham.
I will say that was safety related. We followed kind of guidance around intersections. You're not really supposed to park within, 20 feet of intersections, things like that. So I think we did.
And there were a
there's
couple of driveways that had
Yeah.
line spaces very close to the driveway opening that you could not see past a parked car.
Right.
So I think you're right, we lost maybe 3 in total.
Yeah,
So yes, that would be revisited and there's potential when you start doing those bump outs that we would probably lose a few more.
That was what
And
the
then-
president said yesterday was probably the biggest concern was
Yeah.
losing more parking.
well, and I'm concerned that people are gonna say, well, you're gonna make the sidewalk larger, I'm losing more of my land. So I just, and that's where,
Yeah.
you're gonna engage the neighbors. I just don't know if
Yes.
you've already received that resistance or you're expecting that, or if you think that's
Oh,
We have
gonna
a
kill it.
sense of
I'd
what
say-
we're in for.
We had quite a few meetings, more than a few meetings at Pine Point when we were going through the master plan. So we did hear that. At the same time, people want wider sidewalks, but like you said, you're then dealing with their front steps.
We've also had a subcommittee that's formed with the people of Pine Point, I think is their new name. That's specifically advocating for this project. And I
Yes.
met with them last year and we
Mm.
promised that we would advance the design money in this
So
year.
that was the revelation I had with Dennis Meehan today, was I was like, sometimes you talk to staff for years and counselors have no idea.
Yeah.
Oh,
that
yeah.
those communications have been happening, and that's why I wanted to talk about those, because like, especially East Grand, I'm like, how do they feel about it? Cause I know they don't have a lot of room down there, they just lost some spots, they're a lot more organized than they were before.
Mhm.
And so that's where I was at.
Even though they're asking for it, we know it's
not
gonna
an easy
require
lift,
right?
a lot of process.
Yeah.
And it's just unfortunate that we can't, I understand, find like funds to do that,
Mhm.
but eventually.
Would we get reimbursed as part of when this goes out for construction would. Like, how does that
Good.
work if we get funds from another entity to help with construction? Like,
Not
would,
sure what other entity you're. hoping
Right,
is
like,
gonna
we-
help us.
When
That's what, is there? one?
yeah, well, that's what I'm hoping, like,
It's not gonna rate very highly. As Angela said, we've
Mhm.
tried year over year to go through the PAC system. It just doesn't rate highly, very competitive because of
Okay.
the roadway type it is.
mhm,
You know, it is a major, it's a numbered route, but, down there in the winter and it's seldom used. It's kind of a street. So at any rate, we don't have much hope that there is much of any matching funds.
nothing from the state or no grants or anything.
I have not found through DOT or like we said, our regional transportation
Mhm.
partners, but as I said, I've been looking for like those sums for roadway reconstruction. I'm sure there are other spends. I know like we're doing business partnership initiatives with the Downs, so that's really bringing in that business. I know when we started talking about the potentially putting a roundabout, we started having conversations with some of the businesses in that area, like could that be a VPI? At the end of the day, DOT looked at it as there's no crashes there. What are you solving? What is the problem you're trying to solve? Because people go through it so slowly
Mhm.
and they're
Like,
very
what is
safe.
Using,
Yeah,
There's
where
no
do I go?
crashes there.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's
Just
where that kind
surprising.
of died, but
Yeah.
also along that stretch, I don't know how many businesses are to be able to pull that into, say, a business partnership initiative. So we typically head then to our municipal partnership initiatives, which has
Mhm.
been very successful on Pleasant Hill Road, and latest is our Gorham Road. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, we have consistently
Yeah.
been successful with, even with the MPI money. Again, it goes towards those large volume
Just to round
roadways.
this out, perhaps, I think I mentioned it before, but we did spend a lot of time back in 2017, 18 on this, and we're coming up empty in terms of how we're gonna fund this. At the same time, Gorham Road, which is a total different classification, it really serves a major purpose for our town.
Mhm.
Was something that was fertile ground for us, and we
Yeah.
were able to secure good partnerships and it built, 2/3 of it out,
Mhm.
and yet this problem doesn't go away.
No, it's an important part of our town.
Yeah.
I
It
mean,
is.
I park right on East Grand. I experience it. I get it. I just am curious kind of what the feedback or pushback we might get from residents about what that takes, but ultimately the goal is good.
In my conversation with, blanking on the name right now, the President Association.
That's why I keep saying the president of the.
Okay, we'll just say that.
that.
Mark,
He
It is
seemed,
Mark, yeah.
in the conversations he had with me, very positive, and I was talking about, okay, as we're doing the work, like you said, we try to do in the shoulder seasons, things like that, it's gonna be disruptive. I mean, we're gonna go in there and kind of do a lot of havoc and put everything back, but I think what I got from them is we're ready for it.
Yeah.
Like, we've been waiting and we're ready for it.
Mhm.
It's, the question is, what's the plan look like?
Yeah.
Right.
Is where the detail is where we sometimes can't always get a consensus.
Yeah.
Right.
But they're all ready for the project.
And this design will define that
Yeah,
detail, and we're gonna have
yeah.
to engage them in.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
question.
Anything else for Angela?
No, Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Angela.
Appreciate it.
All right, so now to see Tom's Magic, is that where we are in our
Did you
agenda?
want to talk transit, Metro?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I talk about that real quick? Sorry. Have you had a chance yet to watch the,
Watched some of it.
okay,
Yes, I watched.
okay, because I'm just curious. I'm not pushing anything, but I'm just curious, like, what happens if the council over the course of the year decides that we do want to proceed? The timeline they put out insinuated we would put money in this year. How would that work from a budgetary perspective if we don't have a line item, or do we need?
Yeah, what I heard pretty clearly is there's 6 months of work between now and kind of going live, even if we said we wanted to go.
Mhm.
And so I think that's in part why they gave us kind of half year expenses. They also are on a calendar year, more on a fiscal year.
Okay.
So like we said earlier, without the budget authorization, we effectively couldn't move forward. And I think they'll be looking for some level of commitment. I think it will take shape in a number of forms, formal membership. I don't know if there's actual, probably further action by council to say, yes, we want to become part of Metro,
Mhm.
appointing a representative to serve on the governance board. from a budgetary point of view, we do and have for about 10 years. Contribute $25,000 toward the Old Orchard Biddeford Saco line. I think Len mentioned it last night. They are in active discussions with that organization for that to become part of Metro, which I think would be welcomed and create a far more centralized system in our region. So theoretically, that money is in the budget, and I think that can and should be counted toward our transit investment, if you will.
Where is it in the, is it?
It's
not in
under
the
general
CIP?
government.
Okay,
We might want to find a better place, but that's where it was parked and has
Mhm.
remained ever since. And that's not to say if we don't make that commitment, the buses are going to continue to run. This is a fixed route. We have to be along it. And I think it was goodwill to say we want to start getting involved in transit. At the time, they were the only provider.
Yeah.
Now we've got, I think, much more interesting options, I think, and better
Mhm.
options. So long story short, I was just looking at the math, the financial stuff that they provided last night. They provided ranges, if you want to just take the midpoint. And this is for the combined service. This would be new fixed service along Route 1 and
Mhm.
at least initially, and then this micro transit. I think it would require another $65,000 toward this effort.
and this would be in the operating budget,
It would,
and then, could TIF funds be used to cover it?
yes, very squarely. Unfortunately, we've tapped those very heavily. I don't know that we even have enough to fund that.
What did they say their ridership was? 2 million or something.
Wait, there was a chart in there.
Yeah, that sounds right,
High
John.
of that,
1.8.
Yeah.
1.8, and that's coming back from COVID. So there's COVID.
That's right.
250,000 people in the metro.
And I think pre-COVID, they were
I mean, no,
looks like 2.1 or 2.
Mhm.
it was
Yep.
250,000 people.
And I think this is across all of their lines. And they
Right.
could,
That would include Portland.
Yep. Yep.
So forth.
Maybe for this one, maybe to give Counselor Shoup time to watch. And maybe to get some feedback from other counselors, like, would they want to see this 65K included? Or not, just to reserve the right to do this next year if the council decides to do it. And again, if we don't spend the money,
looks like fund balance.
yeah. Or would it go back to the TIF? If we use TIF, it would go back to the TIF fund, right?
Right, we wouldn't draw it from the TIF fund.
Okay. So I don't know, maybe just a discussion topic for May 1st when we come back, if that's something that we want to.
My general question, I think, was kind of half-baked. I didn't see, I mean, I thought that the concept of the micro transit was, and he misunderstood my question with respect to the Uber. Didn't necessarily need to use Uber, but the whole technology of the ride share planning, all of that stuff strikes me as having tremendous potential, particularly in Scotland. And could have a lot of benefits to this town. But to this town, you have to master its rural nature. You have to figure out ways to get it connected to the big thing. And I guess you heard me say last night that, the real nut in all of this in terms of, what they're trying to do is drive all this traffic Portland on the bus. But nobody seems willing to address the fundamental issue of reducing parking and traffic in the inner city of Portland. And when I say they could solve that problem with a streetcar, a dear friend of mine was the mayor of Portland, Oregon, who designed the streetcar, and I've spent hours with him on his sailboat talking about its potential for our community. So it sort of feels to me like Scarborough's position in this, Angela, ought to be to think about what we could do to make to create incentives for people to not use their cars to get to Portland, if you will, and to think clicks down the future. But we really ought to be saying to the metro people, why don't you start thinking about solving the central problem which is worse. Sucking all these people in here. And thank you. I know this paper, I don't think I'm gonna read it. Anyway, that's my general feeling about it. If you share that. I mean, I'm not saying that stuff is cool for Scarborough, but I didn't see their solution as being anything that we
I think
expected.
they're tapping into a need. It was, I've been trying to figure out in Falmouth how my coworker's son was been getting from high school to the gym, and now I understand, because I'm like, the bus does not take him to the gym.
Yeah.
I'm like,
For
and,
$2.
and that's what I was like, holy cow, I feel like even did my eyes, like as a parent with a 14-year-old, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I definitely think there's a need.
Mhm.
I think it's, but it's so new, it's kind of hard
Yeah.
to see. I mean, I see that it's working. I'm not against the idea. I just also think because Scarborough's so spread out, I mean, I did watch part of it, and I mean, all they kept talking is that first mile and that last mile, and that is, I think, one of the biggest things that we have here. That's a huge
I think the
battle.
one unknown for us that we'll know more about it, certainly within the year, this next year, is private involvement, really the
Yeah.
downs. They are just entering their second negotiations for their traffic movement permit, and I'm certain they'll be looking for ways to satisfy their concerns, including investing in transit. So
That
I
would
think
be
we
awesome
can be a
if they covered the
beneficiary.
cost.
They have
Yeah, that seems
a traffic
appropriate.
demand management plan.
I was just gonna say, based on the presentation last night, you could always just fund the pilot program specifically around the micro transit. They were offering that as well.
I think they were saying,
And then allow their negotiations with the Old Orchard line to kind of materialize or finalize, and if they take over the fixed system, then maybe we have that conversation a little more.
And I
fruitful.
know Karen Martin has mentioned in the past too that, and they mentioned it last night about the Maine Health or the
Right.
Maine campuses, that they've been begging them to come and saying, we'd rather just give you money to get transit where our employees need to go, because parking is on demand for
Yeah.
them. And so I think what you saw was, I think they put in like $5,000 or something like that, which
felt
seems like
low.
they're trying to go, they probably were thinking, let's put 0 because we don't know, they can't commit.
Mhm.
But so there's more than just one partner, I. will
Before May
find it.
1st, allow us to explore what a pilot project would look like and what costs may be associated with, or report that.
And we could also,
Since
mean, if we
Autumn had
ever-
That idea, I'm gonna ask her.
Yeah. if
I'll
we
look
ever
for
put
that.
in a number to, we can put in a lower number to incent Maine Health and the Downs to say, if you guys want this, we'll go up to this amount. You put in some to get a pilot going or something. Like, again, I think for me, strategically, I think showing that this goes back to what you were saying earlier in the comms meeting about, we put a little money out there, it might get other people to put their money forward,
Yep.
knowing that there's something there that they can contribute to. So
So what you're saying is you agree with me on transit, but not necessarily.
no, I agree with you. I agree with you with the concept of put a little incentive out there and you can get other people to come to the table. Don't put anything out there. It's less likely that they'll come to the table, or at least I don't think they would.
Well, I mean, and a lot of that stuff is like, if you're building a mall, once you get your anchor store, it's easier to get the other.
Yeah.
tenants.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
fundamentally the concept.
Yeah, so May 1st, if you want to come back
Sure.
and we can talk to other counselors just to, because again, it was all new for them yesterday. So maybe after they think about it a little bit.
And it is online now too. The transportation committee had another conversation, and so that is online. You can see that
Yeah.
as well as the workshop. So if that's helpful. And I do know we were approached with that age-friendly community group that I don't know where to send them, and they're like, well, can you just do this for me, please? And I'm like, no, it's a process. You have to talk to your counselors.
Yeah.
So I have a lot there. I think there is a senior voice there that
Mhm.
you're not hearing yet, but we're hearing it. So that's why I just encourage them to participate in all of these type of things and get their voice out there.
Yeah, I wish they would have spoke yesterday.
I know they're a little timid.
Yeah.
But not with.
Yeah, not with
staff,
you.
with most-
I saw them in the audience. That's why I was like, I wish they had gotten up to the podium. All right, so, okay, I think the last item is Tom's gonna share us where we are. And then he and Kate are gonna tell us their magical plan to get us to where we want them to be. Yeah.
Before we go off CIP, I just want to I think Kate made mention of it in her presentation. In the school CIP, there is money provided for what has been conveniently called, we workshop this title, transitional facility needs. And that really is, and I'll let Kate kind of explain perhaps what that is.
Yeah, so there, originally, we had, continued sort of along the same lines of putting money into our long-term
Page
planning account,
122.
which is where, we've had funding so far for the building project and, preliminary funding for all of the studies in Harriman's contract and so forth. Those things are, preliminary planning without an actual approved project are not bondable. Funds are not bondable, they are appropriated, right? So all of the money that we've used so far to date through this current fiscal year has been either capital reserve funds, which the school has pulled from their capital reserve account, or appropriated in prior years before we got to the point of having capital reserves. So when Tom and I sat down and started talking about this year's FY26 budget, what we really need money for is less the project itself, because we've got funds invested in all of the design and engineering and so forth, and more the solution that we're going to need between when we decide on what the project is and when the project comes to fruition, which could be more tangible things, right? Like space that's rented or space that's, temporary space that's constructed or what have you. So we came up with this other name for it, transitional facilities. And we put it under the project line, the building project line, instead of under long range planning, because it's a more tangible, more concrete ask for something that may physically get us from point A to point B.
Problem is, we don't know what it is and we don't know what it costs.
Exactly.
What we do know
So-
is you have a bumper crop of kindergartners coming in 2027.
Exactly. So
Can I
the
ask a quick question?
$60,000 would be added to the balance of whatever we have in our capital reserve fund right now, which is about 800,000. That's what we bumped it up to at the end of fiscal year 24, and we're not proposing to use anything of the reserve funds in the FY26 budget at this point. Just kind of keeping everything together and waiting for SBAC and for the council and the school board to come up with a more concrete solution so that we can know what it is that we would need to spend that money on. But it is a little nebulous, right? Because we're going in parallel with that process. And if we get to May 2nd for the board and May 7th for the council, and we're voting in second reading, we're basically just saying, here's some building funds, here's some project funds. And we might not have a clear vision of what that looks like. Is that fair to say, Tom?
Good. Well, you mentioned not using capital reserve funds, but what about impact fees, school impact fees for these?
Didn't really talk about that,
We do have them programmed in kind of the traditional method.
the debt service.
To service the school's debt.
Mhm.
And essentially our policy is to use the actual amount collected 2 years from 2 years ago. So
Mhm.
we have certainty of what that number is. There's not much else there.
There's
There
not
might be
much.
300,000 or 400,000 extra money, extra. So we don't see that as a viable solution, frankly.
Mhm.
In a perfect world, we wouldn't need to spend any of this.
Yeah.
But I think the fear is that
It's a
we're gonna know
contingency.
more in the course of this fiscal year.
Mhm.
Exactly.
What that is.
Yeah, and I think the word contingency is perfect, right? It's like, we don't know what it is, but we know we need something.
And we
And
definitely,
we're going to come to some sort of
Yeah.
clarity for that after the budget is passed.
and regardless of, well, this school referendum is going to pass,
Which
but in
absolutely
the
will
off
happen.
chance that it doesn't, it just makes this money even more important.
Right.
Because that incoming class is coming, so something will
Even
have
if
to
it
be done.
passes, very likely there's gonna be
Yeah.
some transitional needs.
Yeah, because whatever new building project you have isn't going to happen overnight.
That makes sense.
I would hope they sequence the projects such that it meets kind of the immediate oncoming need as best it can.
Yeah,
So there are transitional costs. That's
Mhm.
what I'm taking away.
transitional facilities.
Transitional, because we need to have a place to put the kids when we've torn down the classroom or ripped up their portable or whatever.
Actually, the way either option does not displace kids, so I don't think it's that issue. It's really dealing with expected enrollment.
Too many children.
we're gonna have too many
for the size of
kids
space
to-
we have
To
today.
deal with the space we
Yeah.
have.
So in the scenario of like,
So
we break ground to build a school that takes 3 years, but the current schools that the kids are in may be too small. So we may have to add another portable temporarily, or we may,
I get that.
Yeah.
My question is, okay, so how much? I mean, it sounds to me like
600K.
that's kind of, I don't want to say it's obvious because you spent a lot of time sorting through, but there are transitional costs. Make an estimate of how much they are, and we need to put them in the budget, otherwise they won't be there. Is
Mhm.
that a fair summary of
Yes.
where we're at? Okay,
So
just want to make sure I wasn't getting one.
in this proposal currently, we have $600,000 proposed. For that purpose. And the concept is that we would have that available to us if it's approved in the budget for a use to be defined. You know, hopefully by the time we're having those second reading discussions, there's some more clarity about it. But at least shortly after. The budget is passed, and we would also have the board's ability to tap into the school reserve, capital reserve fund. So all told, we'd be talking $1.4 million to do something great. To solve the problem in the short term. While the building project proceeds. And, you know, again, and Thomas said this a number of times, you're not gonna spend the money without a plan. But you can't make a plan without some money.
to know what you need to spend.
And Kate, is there some assumption? Maybe I just. That the operational costs of the new school could be lower depending on which option, or it could actually be higher.
Yeah, they're working on that right now. We did have, operational costs for some of the earlier proposals, in the failed referendum. And now that the committee has narrowed it down to 2 proposals, we're in the midst of costing out the operating piece as well, because you're right, there would be definitely a difference between running 4 schools and running
Right.
3 schools and running 1
So
school.
with a reduced operating costs, you would recoup some of the transitional costs over time.
Mhm.
And with a increased operation cost, you would just be spending.
That would just be money to get you from here to there.
Just to get you from here to there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm sure you could come up with a scenario where you bought a portable and put it somewhere and then used it somewhere else, but. I mean, essentially, you'd just be sort of biding your time until you started into the new. Situation,
What
whatever.
are they
that
gonna
looks like.
do with the portables? They're gonna shred them or sell them? Or-
Well, we just stay in them for 30 years.
Mhm.
Mhm.
They're like twice their useful life, so first.
You know, when I was at Boston College, they built temporary student housing called the Mods. It's still there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I graduated in 1975.
there you go. Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm visualizing a really nice, trailer village on the pickleball court.
The skate park.
Let's bring it all back together.
Yeah.
Go full circle.
She's joking if you're watching, I
Oh,
hope.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
No pickleball
snack-
supporters
snack
to
time.
call me.
We'll send them your way, it's okay.
Yeah, I've never played pickleball, but you really don't want to
Yeah.
watch me play sports at all. So I
We're gonna
think-
look out the window and watch you.
Yeah.
We'd be right there.
So,
All right, so Tom, you wanna walk us through kind of where we are?
yeah, so this is a scorecard. I'm gonna have Liam kind of walk you through, but we did take, I would say, some liberties. I took your advice or directive to come back to you with, I think, to keep within the concept of what you wanted to do, but to add some level of kind of practicality in terms of when we actually could accomplish these things and what effect that has on the budget. So would you walk through it?
So, you know, what we heard out of our budget review sessions was support for adding a third ambulance to town. Seeking to put on 4 police officers. The committee also expressed support for a dispatcher position. And then you sort of suggested to find a way to make that work without realizing the full cost. And so what you see in front of you is essentially deferred hiring of many of those positions in consultation with the fire and police chiefs. So the new firefighters we propose to bring on, target date would be October 1, so essentially Q2 of our fiscal year. And as such, that brings down the net cost by 25%. So 622,000 is a gross expense. And then we also reduce both this projected savings to the day firefighter line as well as the anticipated revenue accordingly. So you'll see a $357,000 reduction to day firefighter, $75,000 additional revenue. Another fund or another source of revenue in there, which was discussed by the fire chief in his presentation, was a one-time Maine EMS sustainability grant to go and fund that. So that'll be an $85,000 additional revenue. To get the police officers, again, these are tough positions to find. What we're proposing, I said deferred hire of 6 months. We'd actually propose to hire 2 in the fall, again, October 1 and 2 in the spring on April 1. That would be our goal, again, with some flexibility in there. So that essentially cuts the fiscal year expense in half. So $237,000. Dispatch is again one of those departments, and Tom has said this, I think, throughout conversations around additional staffing, is it really hasn't been fully staffed in some time. We are on the cusp of being fully staffed for the first time in many, many years. We would like to see some runtime. So while we certainly appreciate the chief and certainly appreciative of the support for 2 additional positions, we'd like to try 1. And that would be a December or a January 1 hire. So again, that cuts that into a quarter. And then we also charge the chiefs with going back and sharpening their pencils a bit on the rest of their operations budgets to say the council's willing to support your request for additional staffing. We need to pare back some of these pieces. So they went back and reduced the police dispatch and fire incentive reductions. And again, that's just frankly having better data. As you know, with the collective bargaining agreement, there was support for the physical fitness, which is an optional program. Of course, we'd love to have 100% of participation in that. The reality is we don't. So this is largely reflective of what that participation is through the first quarter, with the idea that it will probably hopefully stay consistent. Police vehicle reductions, again, this is always something that I think gets some level of scrutiny. They pare back that one of their vehicle requests, saying we'll stretch that for another year. So that reduced that line item.
This isn't one of the front line. It'll be an unmarked vehicle.
Right. So we're still gonna move forward with 4 new cruisers and the tactical van. It's essentially one of the administrative vehicles. And then Higgins Beach, proposing to increase that fairly substantially. We're booking $20,000 in revenue. We actually think there's another 70 there. And that's based on the 3-year look back average. So what we're actually seeing for revenue in that.
I think we just missed that, frankly, first time through.
Yeah, I think we've just always been conservative. It's always come well above budget. And then the additional revenue for childcare, that was an oversight on our part. We had booked in our in the pieces that you reviewed, the expense and the revenue. We booked the expense in the budget. We failed to book the revenue. So that's not work we did. It's simply a correction. So all of that said, it's $450,000 in additional expense, $270,000 in additional revenue for a net of $183,572. So that's over and above the proposed budget.
But the childcare coordinator,
I'm sorry, that's a misnomer. I apologize. That's recreation revenue.
okay,
Sorry,
That's
we
the
do not have
program.
that was my oversight.
yeah, 'cause we're not doing the
But we're
childcare.
not doing the child
Right.
care coordinator. I apologize. So that should be recreation revenue that we failed to book with the initial budget presentation.
And what's above is simply captures what Kate brought forward to you from the school side. A series of changes resulting in 339,757.
And other than continuing kindergarten enrollments, is there anything else in your budget that's a item in motion?
Yes, we are still working on some refinements. We went back through our capital budget. There's a couple of items that are appropriated there
Mhm.
that we're looking at deferring in two different ways. I haven't given Tom any updated numbers because we're still sort
Yeah.
of spinning through it. There's some energy costs we're looking at, going back and re-looking at projections for open positions because we've filled quite a few of them.
Mhm.
So rather than having an estimate, we can have an actual, which I'm hoping will bring us down a little bit. I anticipate that by the 28th, when we have our next finance committee meeting with the school board, we'll have a full package. Because we need to be voting on the first.
So they're voting on the first for their second read when we're meeting
And you guys,
to finalize our recommendation. So how does that work if there's something that comes out of that,
then we go back after you guys
Okay.
make changes.
okay,
We would reconvene and make those adjustments.
Okay.
Yeah,
But we'll cer-
unfortunately, it's a little weird on the timing, but we have
Yeah.
to have our vote to be able to give you
Right.
the budget
Okay.
to vote on.
Yeah, the issue would be if there's any deviation, but we'd certainly have the handful of things that
Yeah.
Kate will be bringing to her finance. I'll bring here as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So-
Anything that we can move before you guys
Yeah.
get together.
Can you move it down?
Yeah.
I'll put it on down.
You want to hear us? Yeah.
The only thing that's scary right now is electricity. That's the only thing that I'm entertaining the possibility of going up anymore because Anthem was plenty.
Yeah.
That was ugly.
Comes from Canada, right? That electricity.
Pretty much,
Yeah.
yeah.
Going up like 25%?
What are-
you saying?
Exactly.
Our friends to the north.
30% if we can have it.
So with the adjustments, the mill rate now is 4.12% versus the 3.48% we started with.
Correct.
So.
And I think, you know, if we
question about
can
that.
continue to bring that down a little bit, I mean, I think Tom and Liam and I have talked about, let's try and get that down below 4 at least.
Mhm.
So, question I have about that, something that confused me when I first looked at the budget, so I saw that the personnel cost of the executive went down 794 change. And then I said, well, they must have moved people to other departments or something. I went for a long look. But now I understand that am I correct, that was money that was put in last year's budget to make sure that we had ample wiggle room for the contracts.
And we didn't want to show our hand as to what we were prepared for.
I understand.
Yep.
And that money then was in there in the calculation of last year's mill rate.
Mhm.
Is that
Mhm.
correct?
Yep.
Okay. And so now we're taking that out of this year's budget. But that allowance remains in the current mill rate. Is that fair to say? In other
I
words,
think what you're missing is,
that's what I'm trying to understand.
last year's budget, we had that 800,000, we'll say, as a single number.
Right.
Once the contracts were settled, we distributed those funds accordingly, in accordance with the terms that we settled on. So they still exist. That are built into the tax rate for last year. They're just distributed to the particular departments in accordance with the terms that we agreed to.
Okay.
And the
But
unspent stuff,
of the 800 grand was a contingency, basically. Did we spend it all in the negotiation?
No, we did not.
Okay, so a portion of that, I guess what I'm getting to is a portion of that money lives in the tax rate and in this budget. So when I just add it up in gross terms, I say, well, really, if I'm trying to understand how much the gross budget changed, I really need to back that number out or some portion of it out of last year's budget. When I do that,
A portion perhaps, yeah,
Okay.
and the money that wasn't spent in this year's budget will default to fund balance. But
Okay.
yes,
well, okay, so that it goes to fund balance. Got it.
And what's
And I'm
included,
asking, but I guess the question maybe it shouldn't. Okay, I mean, I know we're trying to grow the fund balance and so forth, but the intent of the original decision was to make absolutely sure that we had the budgetary authority to negotiate our union contracts. And now we have some change left over. And understandably, the leftover stuff kind of goes to fund balance, but this is a pretty big number. And what I'm saying is that if that number could come back out, get us to the mill rate that we were talking about originally.
I remember we talked
would
about
like
that
that.
when we were negotiating this, that.
Yeah.
You know, if there was unassigned fund balance that was a result of the negotiation, could we apply it to year 2 of the CBAs just to kind of offset the increase that would happen the next year? So I guess maybe that's something for you guys to explore and come back at the next meeting is that,
The cleanest way to do it is to include whatever sum you choose. That was about a $300,000 number, as I recall, as a use of fund balance, because that's the simplest way for it to come in and to provide the sort of bottom line benefit you suggest. Trying to carry it over from fiscal year to fiscal year, I don't think is a good practice.
Well, I understand, and I think, and I would have no problem with that methodology. The issue really is in making sure that it's understood that it's not dipping into the fund balance. It's not putting some money in it that might have otherwise gone in it, so that we can, it's not going into the union contracts, but realistically, the union contracts on the town side are the big ones are fire and police.
Yeah.
And we're spending money on fire and police. So it would make some sense if we could carve that money out and keep the mill rate down. That would help.
The only downside, and I'll say this as we are on the doorstep of borrowing $130 million in bonds, is that we'll be back to the bond market. I'm extremely proud to be able to announce to the bond analysts when they're doing our ratings that we have not used fund balance, shown fiscal discipline, however justified it may be. It's
That's
really
really
clean.
for the more complicated method of getting the money.
But it's a real clean and persuasive argument to say we have demonstrated fiscal discipline.
Right.
And have weaned ourselves off for 10 years and have not used fund balance, and here are the results.
And it's another contribution towards our target of 16.67 minimum fund balance, so. I hear you.
Just for a moment, if I came to the world, I'd say, no, you're in your account, figure it out.
Yeah, I get you, and I fully understand what you're saying.
You understand what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And we're trying to serve two masters here. One, we are trying to use money, which really was allocated for the most part to fire and police, to carry over and serve fire and police.
Yeah.
And we are trying to show the bond market that we're not dipping into fund balance, which in fact is true. We're not dipping into fund balance. We're just not adding to it. That's fine.
yeah, I'm a proponent of trying to put it in the fund balance, and just, again, I think of the big bond that's coming, and I would rather see that money go into fund balance. This is a good question though for council. Like, I think we had a different council last year when we were debating the fund balance, because remember last year we were debating whether to use it as well, and it kind of, it's not something we should take off the table, but I think it's something that, just speaking for myself, I'd prefer to see it go into fund balance and continue to, at least with that big bond on the table. Like, if we didn't have the school next year, I probably would be 100%, how do we make this work? But like, with the school coming, I think we have to focus on what the credit agencies are gonna.
So we're going from, what was it, 38 cents per thousand to 45 cents per thousand? Is that
The difference.
was the last sheet?
Didn't fit in here.
0.38.
It was
3.48 was the
38 to 45, you're correct.
38 and 45. So what's that? 7 cents per 1,000. That's not a lot.
That's not. My preference, and you guys kind of alluded to it, is if we can get it under 4. That would be my preference. Which it sounds like there might be some things in motion.
Yeah, I would agree with that, even if it
Are you
were
okay with-
39,
Yeah.
if there's some way to get it, 39.99,
Yep.
whatever,
Yeah.
We call that Walmart first.
I'm supremely confident between Kate and I, we will
Mhm.
you
deliver
can do that.
information to you on May 1st to, at the very least, there are 3 in that number. And we'd love to get back to where we started. I won't promise that, but we'll do our best.
Yeah, if you guys can,
Well, that's,
extra credit if you get back to 3.5. I think that would be
prefer stars,
awesome.
thanks.
Yeah.
It's not
I don't know
stuff
how
we
many
need.
gold stars I
Include
can
my
come up with,
severance.
but
Say that again, Pete.
I don't know how many gold stars I can win, but I do think that we can bring it back down.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Okay. I mean, I think this is a great budget with the changes we made so
Yes.
far. Like, I think it's, I'm a little uncomfortable personally because it's the highest since I've been on council that we put on, but I also know we've been very low every year too, and last year especially, even though I know people felt the reval impact, I think when you normalize it, it was like less than 1% increase. So that's where we were very, very cautious last year. And I think this year, there's so many good reasons to make these investments. Like, I feel like I can justify everything.
in terms of I guess, the story behind this.
Mhm.
I think that Kate, on the school side, honestly, I understood it pretty well. That the new stuff was a small portion of the total increase. And I think that's also true on the
Yeah.
town side, they're just having trouble quantifying it. And that is to say that, most of this is in union, I don't know, in contracts and wages and salary increase that we are either contractually committed or morally obligated, if you will, to show parity to the other employees.
Mhm.
So it's not like there's a lot of new stuff being added.
You sound like you read my Counselor Corner article.
But I will
John, I
say,
haven't read a single council corner article here since.
but I will say that the new investments that you've directed just through this review process, I think there are some really powerful stories to
Yeah.
tell about what do we get with this
Right.
police investment. We get something very tangible that we can talk about. Same is true on the fire side. So we often don't have a way to kind of articulate the value of the investment. We've got some very tangible
Mhm.
results here, I think.
I get a fire chief who understands my feelings about silence. That's what I'm fire.
Just in terms of the mill rate impact, at least historically, we did an exercise. It wasn't last year. I think it was perhaps the year before where we asked our statistician to run, what would it look like if we had an actual 3% mill rate increase every year? That was the goal. And the amount of revenue that wasn't generated through taxation because we had 1% or less than 1% or 1.0%. I think if you still place that in historical context, we're still well below. I think I ran the average exclusive of reval years, so it was still well below 3%.
Yeah.
And so even with this, for whatever it's worth, I think that's an interesting.
Well, I think that is important.
Yeah.
Because from the taxpayer's perspective, it's trend. And it's the trend in relationship to your other costs per living. It's the trend in relationship to your income, which is very, so for this kind of increase for working people who it's not awful. But it certainly is for that portion of the community that's on fixed
You're
income.
also-
Circles.
You're also
back to that.
investing in what the community's told us they highly value, and we think that should resonate, right?
Mhm.
Public safety, we're off the charts.
It's fire and public. I mean, I feel like it's schools, fire, public safety is where we're making the investments.
I think that the messaging over the past several years has been to have something that's predictable.
Yeah.
Right, and so even though the council didn't set a goal this year of 3%, that goal, the point of it is not to just say, oh, it's 3% because that's the right number for everything all the time. but to say, you know, we want for our community to be able to anticipate what their taxes are gonna look like.
Mhm.
And not have it be like this and that, you know,
Yeah.
all over the place, leaving revals aside,
Yeah.
which kind of has its own magic.
And then we're gonna get the August surprise and we're gonna find
never
out
know.
that the tax rate really wasn't 3 point.
Well, that's the
Maybe
thing,
X,
it's usually
yeah,
down,
yeah.
right?
And
Like,
that's something we need
almost
to,
every year it's.
we
Yeah.
need to shove that up
Right in there.
from the roof.
Yeah.
So we, you know, everyone's stuck at the beach and not paying attention to the good news. And we
Yeah.
don't do a good job of comforting
Yeah.
it, so.
Well, with the leader gone, now we need to spend some money on communications. That's actually one thing that I don't think we talked about that I personally would like to. We talked about it in communications that with the loss of the leader, we may not have enough in our budget for communications, and so is there a need to bump that up a little bit? Not significantly, but
What is astounding to me, I wasn't gonna bring that up either.
Yeah.
What-
sorry.
What's astounding to me is that the Berlin paper, they pulled their, kind of, their financials. They operate with a little bit of positive, at 85,000 a year, which when you actually look at it, do any kind of analysis, on what it really costs to start up and operate. The real number for startup and working capital is closer to $500,000. And they suggested, and I'll just say this so you can all hear it, that's where that matching thing is, that if the town said, look, you know, sort of like a venture capital raise, that says, if you can come here, if you can show up here with 250,000 in community money, we'll show up with 250,000 in town money, and we will build a not-for-profit independent, sort of on the Setco model. It'll be out there. And I think that's sellable. And I believe that if you did it with a clear transitional strategy, and that's the piece that was missing in the leader, was they didn't migrate to their online platform is offered. But had they decided that what they wanted to do was migrate to a profitable digital piece and get rid of the overhead of the printing, the distribution costs, they could have easily done that. And, you know, so why,
Yeah.
I spent my last week and hours on council, some of the doing the research on it. And it would be a very viable model and a good one, and it would give Scarborough something which I think we need more than a better newsletter. It would be a viable community news, much like the Gore.
Yep.
So that's my speech.
And with that, can I get a motion to adjourn?